want to talk a little bit about biases. And I did a lesson on the negative bias early in the course concepts, but I also want to talk about the confirmation bias that we have because we are all, each one of us as human beings is a biased creature. And what I mean by that is we have things recorded within us based on, you know, how we were raised as a child, our beliefs, our thoughts, our ideas, new information and knowledge that we're presented with, and experiences that we've had in life. Those all shape the biases that we find in inside of us. So we talked about the negative bias and how the negative bias is constantly scanning for threats and looking for danger. It is negative because danger is negative and threats are negative, and that's its job. Its job is to find the things that the body needs to protect itself from. And so we have this negative bias that is constantly, if we let it, it will create in us just this constant vigilance of looking for threats and viewing everything through the lens of danger and the lens of threat. And so we talked a little bit about that in the lesson on the negative bias. But we also have a bias in ourselves called the confirmation bias. And I've been learning a lot more about this lately, and it's helped me tremendously in my life change and in just kind of opening myself up to new perspectives, new knowledge, new things that I need to consider. But this confirmation bias is constantly trying to fit things into boxes. Our brain is like a supercomputer that's already programmed. Our programming comes from those things I already talked about. It comes from our childhood, it comes from our ideas of things, our beliefs, our experiences, things that we've been through. That all works to kind of become these files in our brain. So our brain likes to have things in order. It doesn't like confusion. It doesn't like chaos. It likes for things to be known and understood. And so it's constantly taking in the information throughout our days and weeks and months, the things that we go through, the things that we're taught, all of those things. It's trying to find a file for it so it can put it into that file, and it can feel safe, feel safe again, stabilize our nervous system. And so that is a normal thing. It's a good thing. It helps us to view the world in a certain perspective, in a certain way. It helps us with our safety and our dignity, and the negative bias as well is just designed to protect us. The problem comes in when we start to depend on these biases, let them just automatically run unchecked, and we just let our lives and our brains go based on these negative biases and confirmation biases. And when we do that, our life becomes a confirmed negative cycle because our negative biases are picking up on these things that we're like, oh no, don't go, basically these fear-based things in life. And then our confirmation biases are looking for things to confirm what we already believe from those negative biases so that it can file, away in those boxes. And so we are constantly living in this cycle of, oh, there's another negative thing in my life. Oh, yep, that's true because somebody just confirmed it. But our confirmation bias is designed to look for things to confirm what we already know and already believe because that feels safer than having to consider something new or having to learn something new or having to come at things from a different perspective. And so that confirmation bias is basically our perspective, the way that we look at things, our opinion. And one of the things that really messes up our negative bias and our confirmation bias is that much of it is based on opinion and not factual information. Like if you think about something when you were a kid and like you didn't get picked for a volleyball team or a kickball game, or or you got always picked last, something like that. You might start to believe that you aren't good at these things, that you're, or you're always last, or you're not good at anything. You might start to believe these things, and then throughout life, because that's your negative bias that you've already picked up, your brain is like constantly searching for things to confirm that, so that you'll protect yourself, your dignity. Maybe you won't participate in kickball games anymore, or any games, like you won't speak up for anything. You start to believe that, and maybe you lose at a board game a couple times, and then that confirms that already negative bias. That's just one small example, but that's kind of how it works in our lives. When originally that first, maybe that first kickball game, it was based, like, people were picking based on people that were popular or something. Maybe it had nothing to do with how good you were at the game. It was just those specific people, their opinion, and you took that as a fact, and that it changed your entire life. It adjusted your entire life and how you viewed things after that. And as children, we're much more susceptible to our negative biases and our confirmation biases, because we don't have a lot of agency. We don't have a lot of control. People are kind of controlling our lives for us at that point. We're much more likely to pick up those negative biases and then to confirm them again and again. Our problems develop when we leave those biases unchecked, when we don't check in on them, when we don't update them. We run into this constant confirmation bias negative cycle. And, in order to jump out of that cycle, we've got to do a few things. We've got to change a few things about how we're creating those boxes, and how we're, what we're sticking and piling into our confirmation bias. And in order to do that, the first thing we have to do is get a little bit humble, because nothing keeps us stuck more than our own pride, our own desire to be right, and insistence that we are right, without, checking all of the information and researching. Every human that walks this earth has different beliefs, experiences, thoughts, ideas. We all are different. Not one of us has the exact same experience. Even like children born into the same family, when they have they grow up in that family, they all come out differently, looking at it differently, different perspectives, different ways they saw it, different things they remember, different things that affected them. That all is normal for humans. And so when we get to this point where we just think that we are the one that's right, that we are the only one that's got things under control and is thinking about things in the right perspective, in the right way. When we think that we're the only one who's right, who has this all together, who knows what's going on, who believes the right things and is following it the right way, we get into this place where we're stuck. We're stuck in this negative confirmation bias cycle, because our boxes are running the show, and our boxes are not perfect boxes. No one has the perfect files in their head that's going to lead them to the perfectly right view of things all of the time. And so when we get stuck in that I'm right and you're wrong, we often are just stuck in that fear cycle of I just don't want to think that there's something else out there that could be right. I want to, like, it keeps me safe. It makes me feel safe. It makes our bodies feel safe that we know, and that we know, like, we know, and there's nothing that you can tell us that could change that. That makes us feel safe. Like, we've got this under control, instead of actually like questioning some of the things that we believe, or some of the things that we've experienced, or that we think. And so one of the first steps to challenging that is to have some humility, to get to a place where you realize, I don't know what I don't know. One of the big things that helped me with my confirmation bias was when we traveled across the world to China to adopt our daughters. We went into a whole different culture. It was a whole different world. They did all the things different separately, and my boxes were all American. I didn't have any boxes that weren't American. That's what my boxes were. Going over to the other side of the world and really, there's very similar things about all humans. We all have needs. We all want to be seen. We all want to be loved. We all, we all want freedom. Like there's some things that are just across the board. And then there's so many other things that are so different. We all just have big differences in us. And so I had to kind of check myself. Like some of the things that I had believed for my entire life were just not right. They just were wrong. And so I had to come to a place of humility where I'm like, oh, I have to shift that belief, because that's just not, it can't be confirmed. Like, and that was me having to look for something that didn't just confirm what I already believed. Because many times the problem with our confirmation bias is it's always looking for things to confirm what we already know and believe. Like it just wants a file to put the stuff in. So it will ignore the other things. It will ignore the things that we need to learn, the things that we need to know to be able to change and to grow. It gives this resistance to that because that feels unsafe. And so that's why I say we need to check and question our biases, because otherwise they will run and control our lives. So humility, and then after humility comes listening. We need to be able to listen to other things outside of our biases, other perspectives, get other knowledge, other facts. I know my confirmation bias has been very strong in many areas where I just think, oh, I know all of this. And then I'll learn something new and I'll have to oh, wait, that it changes the whole way I was looking at something, the whole perspective. And so being able to challenge and question that bias through listening to new information and gaining new knowledge. When we're on social media and we're scrolling or we're consuming content, or the algorithm is developed according to our confirmation bias. So it's feeding us things that we probably already know, that it knows we already like, the things that we've been focusing on the app. It's feeding us more of it because it wants us to stay on the app longer. That's the whole point that's how they make money, is that we consume more content. The marketing is geared exactly to our confirmation bias. And so I'll come across something because I've been scrolling all this other things, and then I've got this ad and I'm like, oh, I must need this in my life because this is going to help me with these things that I've been, looking at on social. Anyway, it's very strongly attached to our confirmation bias. And if we don't question that, if we leave that unchecked, we're just going to be getting more of the same that we've always gotten. We're not going to get outside of, we're not going to grow. We're not going to have any other perspectives. We're going to be stuck in this small world of whatever it is that we're looking at. And so I have to check myself sometimes. I'll be on the app and I'll be scrolling and I'll just be like, yes, that. And everything's just resonating. And I'm like, wait a second, let me stop and let me find some other voices. Let me find some other perspectives of this, because it's very easy to, take something like the Make America Healthy Again movement and all the changes that are coming through that. You could be on board with that movement and be like, yes, that is so good, for America, and we need to be doing this. And then your confirmation bias kicks in, and everything that they do from the top, you're going to be like, yes, that's so good. Yes, that's so good. Well, some of those things probably need to be examined a little bit more, like researched a little bit more. Like maybe some of those we need to pause and say, okay, they've done some really great things, but this particular one, I'm not so sure about. When we find ourselves agreeing with every single thing that's coming up in our feed or coming up in the news or coming up in politics, we need to stop and check ourselves. Like, are we just giving into that confirmation bias, or is this really stuff that, is good and true and whatever? And that's, that's going to be different from everybody's perspective, but we still need to question and check that stuff. And so that next step is just listening to the other side of arguments, searching out sometimes things that you don't agree with, to remind yourself, even just to remind yourself of why you don't agree with it. but also to give yourself a chance to be like, wait, could this be true? Or could this be helpful? Could this be beneficial to me? Look at something from a different perspective. Most of my life has changed just from my shifting of perspective. I believe in it so strongly because sometimes it's just that little shift in perspective, which is why I encourage you to go listen to, watch all these lessons on this YouTube channel, because they may seem simple. They may say, oh, that's stupid. I already know that. Like, I already know I should about nutrition. I should be eating well or drinking water or exercising or whatever it is. But a new perspective sometimes can shift enough to change your life. And so that's what we're trying to do here. And so we don't want to just rely on our biases. After listening comes curiosity. We need to get really curious about the things that we are believing, the boxes that we've created in our brains where we're filing stuff away. Some of the files just need to be cleaned out altogether. Some of them are just useless. Some of them are things that we've believed for a really, really long time that are not true. Just not true. They're just false. Like, we need to get rid of those. Other boxes need to be expanded. They need to be given more room for more information. Because in our limited information, we are not getting the full picture of something, and we're making assumptions based on not having a full picture of something. And so in that, what we come out with is wrong, so sometimes we just need an expanding of those boxes. But we always need to be curious. We always need to be researching. One of the things I've really had to do, especially in the age of AI, like, this is becoming such a huge thing. If you want to stay a healthy human, you need to be doing more research than you are. You don't need to just be scrolling on social and then just believing everything that's on there. There more times than not, I can tell you that a headline or even a news story, all of these news stories come from a confirmation bias. From a bias, like all of them do. Like, no human is unbiased. I believe that some can put themselves in a position where they can kind of be unbiased. Like, I consider myself an Enneagram 9, which is a peacemaker, which usually you can see both sides or all sides of an issue. It's actually a real problem for me a lot because that tends to lend to overthinking, like, because I'm constantly like, well, from this side, but from this angle. And so I'm constantly like, it's hard to make a decision because you're just like, you see it from so many different perspectives. But I still would not consider myself unbiased. Like, I have so many biases in so many areas, and so I think that we need to take a look from this confirmation bias. I think that's why it's so important to talk about, is because we're all coming from a bias, and the things that we're being fed are coming from a bias. And when we're just eating up the same bias over and over and over, we're not learning, we're not growing, we're becoming very stagnant people. A lot of times we're becoming very arrogant, prideful people who think they just know everything. And because everything that they're taking in is confirming what they already believe, that they're right. That can just make us into really critical, angry, ugly, people. And so we need to be making sure that we're checking that. After the curiosity, we just need to be able to look at things from a new perspective. It doesn't matter if you want to change, if you're going to change, you may not change what you believe. As a matter of fact, it's not good all the time to just be constantly changing what we believe. The point is not to get rid of all the boxes so that there's nothing up there and that everything flies. That's not the point. The point is for us to be more intentional about what we are believing, what we are thinking, and through that to gain new experiences. Because the thing about the confirmation bias is it will filter out experiences that don't coincide with whatever is already in there, because it's, that resistance. And some of those things we need, some of those things are the things that we need to change our life. We need to be able to question and check our confirmation bias. And if we are so afraid to get outside of those boxes, I see this a lot in churches, people in their denominations, they're so afraid to even consider something outside of what their denomination teaches or believes, that they're just like, no, that's wrong. They're just very closed off to any new belief, any new information, any new knowledge, any new experiences. And because of that, they stay trapped in this kind of just fear-based religion, and they never really find the freedom in God's love that they were given through Jesus. And so that confirmation bias has actually become their enemy, as you know, and that's the negative bias can become an enemy. Even though these things were given to us to help us, they can turn against us when we leave them unchecked and unquestioned. So I just want to kind of talk about some of that today. I have a couple more lessons that I'm going to be adding to the course shortly. I want to talk a little bit about shame. I think shame can be one of the main catalysts to keep us stuck in our lives when when we really need to better them and change them and grow. And then I also want to talk about the comfort zone, because I think the comfort zone is a really important topic to kind of understand and appreciate that comfort zone that we have in our nervous system when we're in rest and digest. So a couple more of those lessons coming up in the next couple of weeks. But until then,